From the very first moment Prince Naseem Hamed stepped into a boxing ring, he didn't just perform, he electrified. The lights, the flips, the swagger, the showmanship, the knockout power no one could believe came from a man his size. It all created one of the most captivating figures boxing had ever seen. But behind the flash and behind the confidence, something darker was happening. Something that would slowly, quietly, and inevitably destroy one of the most promising careers in modern boxing. Today, we're taking you deep behind the scenes, through the meteoric rise and shocking collapse of Prince Naseem Hamed. And by the time this story ends, you'll understand why a fighter with world-class talent, unmatched charisma, and a global fan base disappeared almost overnight. This is not a story about one moment. It's a story about pressure, pride, conflict, physical decline, and decisions that forever changed the fate of the prince. To understand what destroyed Prince Naseem's career, we first have to understand how he rose so fast. Born in Sheffield, England, to Yemeni parents, Naseem didn't have the typical upbringing of a future superstar. His family was working class, strict, and traditional. But from a young age, the one thing that stood out was his confidence. His coach and mentor, Brendan Ingle, saw something in him immediately. The reflexes, the coordination, the natural athleticism, and most importantly, the fearlessness. Under Ingle's unique, unorthodox training system, Naseem developed the style that would make him famous. Hands low, head movement exaggerated, angles that opponents couldn't read, punches thrown from impossible positions, and knockout power that didn't make sense for a featherweight. It was all wrapped in a personality that was equal parts charming and provocative. Naseem wasn't just a boxer, he was a performer, and the world loved it. His early career became a highlight reel of ridiculous showmanship and violent finishes. He danced, flipped over the top rope, shadowboxed in front of opponents during introductions, and grinned while dodging punches with inches to spare. And then, with one shot, he would end the fight. Prince Naseem knocked out future champions, veterans, and undefeated contenders, all while making it look effortless. By the time he reached world title status, he wasn't just a British star, he was a global sensation. In America, HBO pushed him heavily, and long before social media existed, Naseem became one of the most talked-about athletes in the sport. Crowds tuned in not just for the fights, but for the entrances, the trash talk, the arrogance, and the unpredictable spectacle. Everything suggested he was on track to become one of the greatest featherweights in history. But beneath the surface, cracks were already beginning to form. People close to Naseem say that as he became more famous, the discipline began to fade. The extreme weight cutting, which had always been hard on his small frame, became more brutal as he aged. He started spending less time in the gym, clashing more often with trainer Brendan Ingle, and leaning more into the persona than the training that built it. The split with Ingle, the man who had shaped his entire style, was one of the most pivotal moments of his career. Many experts and insiders agree that this was the beginning of his decline. Without Ingle's structure, angle drills, and focus on movement, Naseem's training became less consistent. His style relied on reflexes and sharpness, and those are the first things to fade when training discipline drops. The flash remained, but the foundation underneath it began to crumble. Despite the growing issues, Naseem kept winning. He defeated Kevin Kelly in Madison Square Garden in a legendary fight where both men hit the canvas multiple times before Naseem secured the knockout. It was thrilling, but it also exposed vulnerabilities. The hands-down style left him open more than ever. As competition improved, he was getting hit frequently, something almost unheard of earlier in his career. But because he kept winning, those warning signs were largely ignored. Money was pouring in. Fame was at an all-time high. Naseem was living the life of a superstar. And sometimes, that is more dangerous than any opponent in the ring. The turning point came in 2001 when Naseem faced Marco Antonio Barrera. Barrera was a highly skilled, highly disciplined, and highly mature fighter. And unlike many of Naseem's previous opponents, he didn't fall for the mind games or the theatrics. In the lead-up to the fight, Naseem barely trained. Reports from his camp described a chaotic environment where conditioning was not prioritized and focus wasn't there. Barrera, meanwhile, prepared like it was the most important fight of his life. When the two entered the ring, the difference showed immediately. Naseem couldn't land anything meaningful. Barrera neutralized his power by circling the right way, cutting angles perfectly, and keeping him off balance. Naseem's timing, once his greatest weapon, looked off. His speed looked dulled, his footwork looked stiff, and his reflexes simply weren't sharp enough to protect him behind a hands-down stance. Barrera didn't knock him out. He didn't need to. He dominated him for 12 rounds, even pushing Naseem's face into the turnbuckle in a moment that symbolized the complete reversal of power. The prince, once a king of swagger, looked lost. It was the kind of defeat that doesn't just break confidence, it shatters illusions. After the Barrera fight, Naseem's career wasn't technically finished, but in reality, it was. He fought once more the following year against Manuel Calvo, but the spark was gone. The confidence wasn't the same. The speed wasn't the same, and fans knew it. The excitement, the aura, the magic. It had evaporated. After that fight, Naseem quietly disappeared from the sport. No dramatic retirement, no farewell tour. He simply faded away from boxing, leaving fans wondering how such a meteoric career could end so abruptly. But the story doesn't end in the ring. Outside the sport, Naseem's life took a dark turn. In 2005, he was involved in a reckless driving crash that seriously injured another driver. Naseem pled guilty and served a prison sentence. This incident further tarnished his public image and distanced him from the boxing community. While he later rebuilt parts of his life and became financially successful, his legacy in the sport became complicated. Legendary talent and unforgettable entertainment, overshadowed by a decline that felt avoidable and a fall from grace that felt tragic. Looking back, what destroyed the career of Prince Naseem Hamed wasn't one single event. It was a combination of factors: the loss of discipline, the brutal weight cuts, the abandonment of the trainer who built his style, the growing disconnect between the prince persona and the athlete behind it, and finally the encounter with a fighter who exposed all the weaknesses he had been ignoring. When you stack all these together, it becomes clear that Naseem didn't lose to Barrera that night. He lost to years of bad habits, overconfidence, and physical decline. In the end, Prince Naseem Hamed remains one of the most influential fighters of his era. His entrances, his swagger, his explosive power, and his entertainment value changed boxing forever. Fighters today still imitate his style, his bravado, and his showmanship. But he also stands as a cautionary tale about the dangers of fame, the importance of discipline, and the thin line between brilliance and downfall. His career wasn't destroyed by a single punch. It was destroyed by everything outside the ring. And that's what makes his story both spectacular and tragic.